Your son asks why you don't come home anymore, she texted her ex. The Korean billionaire read it over her shoulder on the subway. The text had been sitting in her drafts for 11 days. Bella Turner knew this because she'd written it on a Tuesday. A rainy, unremarkable Tuesday when her 4-year-old son Noah had pressed his small face against the living room window and said, very quietly, like he was afraid of the answer, "Mommy, does Daddy know where we live?" She hadn't cried in front of him. She'd gotten very good at that, at folding grief into the smallest possible shape and tucking it somewhere behind her sternum where Noah's eyes couldn't reach it. She'd said, "Of course he does, baby," and hated herself for the lie. And then she'd put Noah to bed and sat in the kitchen with the refrigerator hum as company and typed 11 words into her phone. Your son asks why you don't come home anymore. She hadn't sent it. She didn't know why. Maybe because sending it meant admitting Collins deserved to know. Maybe because part of her, the small, foolish part she kept trying to evict, hoped he'd figure it out on his own. That he'd wake up one morning and feel the absence of his child like a missing limb and come back. Not for her, but for Noah. He hadn't. 11 days later, on a Wednesday evening in late October, Bella Turner stood in the New York City subway with her feet aching inside compression socks she'd been wearing since 5 a.m. Her navy nursing scrubs smelling faintly of antiseptic and the peppermint tea she'd spilled on herself at noon. Her natural hair pulled into a puff that had survived the morning heroically and surrendered sometime around the 3rd hour of her double shift. And she was staring at those 11 words again. The 6 train was packed the way it always was at 7:15 in the evening, bodies compressed into the kind of enforced intimacy that New Yorkers had collectively agreed to simply not acknowledge. Someone's umbrella was stabbing her ankle. Someone else's briefcase was against her hip. The fluorescent lighting was doing everyone on board a personal injustice. She should have put the phone away. She knew that. She had 20 minutes until her stop, and she should have been resting her eyes or mentally preparing for the second shift of her day. The one that started the moment she walked through her apartment door and became mommy. The one with no clock-out time. Instead, she opened the draft. Your son asks why you don't come home anymore. Her thumb hovered. She thought about Noah's voice. She thought about the way he'd pressed his palm flat against the cold glass of the window like he was trying to reach through it. She thought about Collins. His easy smile, his easy promises. The easy way he'd packed a bag 14 months ago and said he needed space to figure himself out. As if fatherhood were a career option he was still considering. She started to add to the text. Her fingers moved. He still sleeps with your old hoodie. The gray one. He calls it his daddy blanket. He's 4 years old, Collins, and he is building a mythology out of a man who doesn't call. She was crying now. Not loudly. Bella Turner did not cry loudly in public. Not because she was ashamed but because she was exhausted, and loud crying required energy she did not have. Tears simply moved down her face with quiet determination. The way she moved through everything. She did not notice, at first, that the man beside her had gone very still. She noticed the stillness before she noticed him. The way it created a pocket of calm in the compressed chaos of the train car. The way the air around him seemed to settle rather than push. She became aware, with the particular awareness that exhaustion sometimes sharpened rather than dulled, that someone was reading her screen. Bella looked up. He was looking at her phone. He was tall enough that even in the crowded car he had something close to personal space, the kind that some people simply generated through sheer presence. Korean, she registered. Early to mid-30s, jaw like something that belonged on a museum wall, wearing a charcoal wool overcoat that had not come off a rack anywhere Bella had ever shopped. Dark hair, slightly longer than corporate, pushed back from his forehead. His eyes, when they finally lifted from her screen to her face, were very dark and very calm. He did not look away. He did not do the polite New York thing, the careful, elaborate pretense of having seen nothing. He held her gaze with the steadiness of a man who had decided, in the span of a few seconds, that pretending was not something he was willing to do. I'm sorry, he said. His English was perfect, the accent a light architecture underneath the words. I didn't mean to read it, but I did. Bella stared at him. Her thumb had locked over the screen instinctively, but it was too late, and they both knew it. The tears on her face were too late too. It's fine, she said, which was the thing she said when nothing was fine. He didn't agree with her. He didn't say of course or sorry for intruding and redirect his gaze back to the middle distance the way any reasonable stranger would have. He simply looked at her with those steady dark eyes and said, "Is he safe?" She blinked. "What? Your son." A pause, careful, like he was choosing each word the way you choose footing on uncertain ground. "Is he physically safe? Is he provided for?" The question was so unexpected that the tears stopped, which she suspected might have been the point. "Yes," she said, slightly bewildered. Yes, he's with my neighbor right now. He's safe." "Good." Something in the man's shoulders eased fractionally. "That's the only thing that matters tonight." The train lurched. Someone's elbow connected with her back. The man beside her shifted slightly, and without any dramatic gesture, simply positioned himself so that the elbow stopped being a problem. It was a small adjustment, the kind you could almost convince yourself was accidental. Bella looked at him for a long moment. "You're not going to look away and pretend you didn't see that, are you?" "No. Most people would." "Most people," he said, with just the edge of something that wasn't quite a smile, "are very committed to minding their own business on the subway. I find that I am not always most people. Despite everything. The exhaustion, the tears still drying on her cheeks, the 11 days of grief sitting in her drafts folder." Bella Turner almost smiled. "That must make the commute interesting." "You have no idea," he said, and this time the not-quite smile completed itself, briefly, before it retreated back behind the calm. The train reached his stop before hers. He stood, and in the moment before he stepped toward the doors, he turned back and looked at her one more time. "Don't send it tonight," he said quietly. Not like an instruction, more like something offered. "You're tired. Whatever you write tonight, you'll wish you'd written differently." Then the doors opened and he was gone. And Bella stood in the crowded train car with the draft still open on her screen, and the strangest feeling that something had shifted without her permission. She didn't send the text. She didn't think about him the next morning. She was too busy. Mornings with Noah were a beautiful, chaotic liturgy that left no room for abstract thought. There was the negotiation over which shirt he would wear, always a negotiation, because Noah at 4 had developed opinions about clothing that were both extensive and deeply irrational. There was the breakfast she made and the breakfast he ate, which were related but not identical concepts. There was his voice, which had been the first sound she'd ever loved without condition, narrating the entirety of his inner world, while she braided his hair and packed his bag and drank coffee that had gone cold. "Mommy, do dinosaurs have feelings?" "I think they probably did, baby. Do they have feelings now? In heaven?" She'd paused at that one, bobby pin between her teeth, heart doing something complicated. "I think if there's a heaven, everybody there has good feelings. Even dinosaurs." Noah had considered this with the gravity of a small philosopher. "Okay," he decided, satisfied. "That's good." She dropped him at preschool, kissed his forehead, watched him run toward his friends without looking back the way confident 4-year-olds do, and stood on the sidewalk for 3 full seconds just watching the door close behind him. Then she'd gone to work. Bella was a labor and delivery nurse at Mount Sinai, which meant she spent her days at the intersection of the most terrifying and most beautiful thing a human body could do. She'd been doing it for 6 years. She was good at it, calm under pressure, warm with patience, precise with her hands. Her coworkers called her Belle, which she'd long since stopped correcting, and the attending physicians trusted her assessments in a way that new residents quickly learned to pay attention to. It was a Thursday when she saw him again. She was in the hospital's main lobby, buying a bottle of water from the vending machine during a break that she had approximately 8 minutes to complete, when she heard someone say a name in Korean, a sharp, urgent syllable, and looked up to find a man in expensive clothes standing at the information desk looking slightly, carefully, controlled in the way that people look when they are managing genuine fear through the filter of dignity. It was him. The charcoal overcoat had been replaced by a dark suit. He was speaking to the woman at the desk, and whatever he was saying was not landing because the woman was shaking her head and he was very still in the way she'd noticed on the subway, that quality of stillness that wasn't passive but contained. Bella watched him for a moment. He hadn't seen her. She shouldn't get involved. She was on a break. She had 6 minutes. She walked over anyway. "Can I help?" she said, addressing the woman at the desk. "I'm a nurse here. Is there a problem?" The woman looked relieved. "He's looking for someone named Han Soo-jin. She was brought in. I think she may be a patient, but I can't confirm without." "She's my sister," the man said. He'd recognized Bella in the moment she'd spoken, She could tell. A fractional change in his expression. Something that moved through his eyes like the shadow of a cloud. But he'd filed it and kept going. Because whatever was happening with his sister was more important. She was brought by ambulance 40 minutes ago. No one will tell me anything. Bella had years of practice reading the face of someone running on adrenaline and dread. Can you come with me? She said. I'll find out what I can. She found out what she could. It took 15 minutes instead of 6, and her break was technically over, but she tracked down the charge nurse in the ER, confirmed that a Han Soo-jin had indeed been admitted, confirmed the room number and the attending on duty, and walked back out to the waiting area where Kim Tae-yoon, she learned his name from the insurance card he'd handed over, was standing with his hands in his pockets and his jaw set like a man holding a wall up through sheer will. She's stable, Bella said. Panic attack, they think, possibly stress-induced. They're running some additional tests, but the attending doesn't believe it's cardiac. You can see her in about 20 minutes. The relief that moved through his body was so complete and so contained that it was almost private to witness. He closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Thank you, he said. She's going to be okay. He opened his eyes. The dark, steady gaze landed on her with a weight she felt somewhere behind her collarbones. You didn't have to do that. You were scared. I was managing. You were scared, she said again, not unkindly, and watched something in his face soften at being seen accurately. He looked at her for a moment. Bella Turner, he said, reading her ID badge. You're in labor and delivery. I am. That's several floors from here. It is. And yet, she agreed. Something moved in his expression. Not quite the not quite smile from the subway, but a cousin of it. Something that started low and didn't quite surface. I didn't get to thank you properly, he said. On the train. The other night. You told me not to send a text. That's not really something that requires a thank you. Did you? Send it? She looked at him. No. He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. Good, he said again, the same way he'd said it before, like the word was doing more work than its single syllable suggested. His name, she would learn later from a search she absolutely did not intend to do and then did anyway, was Kim Tae-yoon. The Kim family had interests in technology infrastructure, real estate development, and private equity, with headquarters in Seoul and satellite offices in New York, London, and Singapore. He had appeared on Forbes Asia 3 times. He sat on the board of 2 global tech companies and 1 major charitable foundation. His estimated net worth was a number that Bella's brain simply refused to hold in any meaningful way, the way it might reject a word in a language she didn't speak. She sat with this information in her kitchen that Thursday night while Noah slept and tried to decide if it was relevant. It wasn't. Probably. She was a labor and delivery nurse who was raising a 4-year-old alone and had 11 words in her drafts folder that she still hadn't decided what to do with. Whatever Kim Tae-yoon was, he was the furthest possible thing from relevant to her actual life. She almost believed this. She believed it less 2 weeks later, when a florist's delivery arrived at the nurse's station on her floor addressed to Bella Turner, containing a single plant. A small, beautiful succulent in a matte black pot, with a card that read, You told me you were tired. This requires almost no attention and will not die if you forget it for 2 weeks. T. Carmen, the nurse she shared most of her shifts with, read the card over her shoulder and looked at Bella with an expression that required no translation. Before you say anything, Bella said. I'm not saying anything, Carmen said, in the tone of a woman who was preparing to say everything. It's not what you think. What I think, Carmen said, is that a man sent you a plant with a very specific message and signed it with only 1 letter, which means he assumes you know exactly who he is. Bella looked at the card. We just talked on the subway, and I helped his sister at the hospital. It's nothing. Carmen picked up the plant and examined it. This is a Haworthia couperi. These are not nothing plants. Someone who sends nothing would send a bouquet from a bodega. Someone who sends this spent time thinking about what would actually be useful to you. Bella took the plant back. She tried to be annoyed and found she could not quite access the feeling. How do you even know what kind of plant this is? I know things, Carmen said. Text him back. I don't have his number. Carmen gave her a look that suggested this was a problem with a very obvious solution that Bella was deliberately avoiding noticing. She was right. On the back of the card, below the printed florist address, someone had written a phone number in precise, unhurried handwriting. Bella stared at it for long enough that Carmen made a small sound of exasperation and walked away to attend to an actual patient. That evening, after Noah was in bed, Bella sat in her kitchen with the succulent on the table in front of her and her phone in her hand. She typed, "The plant is on my desk. I've been told it's not a nothing plant." 3 minutes passed. She looked at the plant. Her phone buzzed. "It isn't. Nothing plants are a waste of both our time. Taeyun." She stared at the message for a moment. Then she typed, "How did you know where I worked? Your ID badge. Floor number, department, hospital name. I have good eyes. That's borderline unsettling. I prefer thorough. I'm sure you do." She paused, then typed, "How is your sister?" The pause this time was longer. Long enough that she wondered if she'd misread something, stepped into territory that was still tender. Then better. "She's been working too hard. She doesn't listen when I tell her to rest. She's stubborn. Sounds like someone I know," Bella typed, and immediately wondered if she'd overstepped. "I have no idea what you mean," came back almost immediately, and she could feel the not-quite smile through the screen. She should have said good night. She had a 5 a.m. shift. Noah would be up by 6 regardless of when she slept, and the morning liturgy waited with its negotiations and cold coffee and all the beautiful, exhausting weight of being someone's entire world. Instead, she typed, "His name is Noah, my son. In case you were wondering." Another pause. Then, "He's 4. He's the best person I've ever met. That's a significant claim. He asked me last week whether heaven has a lost and found, because he lost his favorite rock at the park and he wants to get it back eventually." She hit send before she could second-guess it. The response took longer this time. Long enough that she imagined him sitting somewhere, an expensive apartment probably nothing like her kitchen, and holding that information carefully. "He sounds extraordinary," Taeyun wrote finally. "He is," she typed. "Good night, Taeyun." "Good night, Bella." She put the phone down. She looked at the succulent. She thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that she was either making a very good decision or a very bad one, and that exhaustion made it nearly impossible to tell the difference. Collins called on a Sunday. Bella almost didn't answer. She was on the floor of Noah's room helping him build a train track that kept collapsing at the same junction, and her phone was in her pocket, and when she saw the name on the screen she felt the old familiar architecture of feeling, the anger and the grief and the hope she resented for still existing, assemble itself without her permission. She answered because Noah was right there, and some part of her still believed, stupidly, that maybe this time. "Hey, Bella." His voice was the same. Easy. Warm in the way a room with no heat source can still feel warm for a moment after you walk in. "Collins. How are you? How's Noah?" A pause in her hands over the train track pieces. "He's right here," she said. "Would you like to talk to him?" Another pause on his end. Shorter than it should have been but longer than she'd hoped. "Actually, yeah, I would. But I wanted to talk to you first." Noah looked up at her with his father's eyes, and the grief was very quiet and very complete. "He's building a train track," she said. "He's been working on it for an hour. Keeps collapsing at the same spot. He is stubborn and patient and perfect," she did not say, "and he gets both of those things from me because you were never stubborn about anything that mattered." "Bella." Collins's voice shifted into the register he used when he was about to say something he'd practiced. "I've been thinking about everything. About Noah. I think I want to try to be more present." The words landed on her the way a wave lands on someone who's already standing in the water. Not surprising exactly, but still capable of knocking you sideways. "More present," she repeated. I know it hasn't been. I know." He exhaled. "I miss him, Bella. I miss you both." "Collins. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just want you to know I'm thinking about it." She looked at Noah. He had given up on the collapsing junction and was now simply running his train over the collapsed pieces, making sound effects with his mouth, completely absorbed in the invented world of it. "He calls your old hoodie his daddy blanket," she said. "He sleeps with it every night." Silence. "He's been asking about you," she continued, and her voice stayed level, which was its own kind of miracle. "He's 4 years old, and he's building a story about who his father is out of almost nothing, because that's what children do. They fill the spaces we leave them with whatever they can find. Bella, don't tell me you're thinking about it, Collins. Either you're in his life or you're not. He doesn't have the capacity to handle almost. She ended the call before he could respond. Noah looked up at her. Mommy, who was on the phone? Someone from Grown Up World, baby. Is Grown Up World hard? She set the phone face down on the carpet and reached for the train pieces. Sometimes, she said. But it has good things in it too. Help me figure out this junction. Noah crawled over with the seriousness of a small engineer. I think, he said, studying it, we need to go a different way. She stared at him for a moment. Yeah, she said softly. I think you're right. She told Taeyoon about the call. She wasn't sure when she'd started telling him things. It had happened incrementally, the way most significant shifts do, too gradual to mark a specific moment of change. Their text conversations had become a daily architecture she'd stopped trying to dismiss as coincidental. He asked questions that showed he'd remembered everything from before. She found herself looking forward to the blue light of her phone screen in the quiet after Noah's bedtime. Collins called, she typed. He says he wants to be more present. The response came faster than usual. What does that mean, more present? I don't know. I don't think he knows either. What did you say to him? She told him roughly. The thing about Noah filling spaces with whatever he could find. A pause. Then, that was the right thing to say. It didn't feel like enough. Some truths don't feel like enough when you're saying them. They're still the right ones. She sat with that for a moment. Then, he made me feel it for a second. That stupid almost hope. I hate that I still have that in me. That's not weakness, Taeyoon wrote. You loved someone and had a child with him. The hope doesn't disappear because the circumstances changed. It just becomes more painful than useful. She read this 3 times. You're surprisingly good at this for someone who describes themselves as thorough rather than perceptive. I contain multitudes, he wrote, and she could feel him perfectly straight-faced on the other end. She laughed. An actual laugh, surprised out of her, in her quiet kitchen at 10 p.m. on a Sunday. The sound of it startled her slightly. The way sounds can startle you in a space that's been quiet too long. I want to meet him, Taeyoon wrote. Her thumbs stilled over the keyboard. Noah, he added. If you're comfortable with that. No pressure. I'm just saying I want to when and if you decide it makes sense. She stared at the screen for a long time. Her first instinct was to say not yet, which was also the honest answer. Her second instinct was to ask him why, what his intention was, what he was building toward. Her third instinct was to notice that she'd been analyzing instead of feeling, which was what she did when she was afraid. Not yet, she typed finally. But I want you to know that I heard you say it. That's enough, he wrote back and meant it, which she could tell from the absence of anything else. He took her to dinner for the first time on a Tuesday, because she'd mentioned offhandedly that her neighbor Mrs. Chun watched Noah on Tuesday evenings so Bella could have what they both called her person time. Which meant she usually sat alone in a coffee shop and read a book and tried to remember who she was before she became primarily a function. He'd said, spend your person time with an actual person. I know a restaurant. No pressure. She'd said yes, which surprised her, and spent 30 minutes in front of her bathroom mirror reminding herself that it was just dinner, which did not explain why she'd changed her earrings twice. The restaurant was quiet and exceptional in the way that places are when they don't need to announce themselves. He was already there when she arrived, and he stood when he saw her come through the door, which was so old-fashioned and so natural on him that she stopped in the entrance for just a second and recalibrated something. He looked at her for a long moment when she reached the table. Not a survey, not the appraising look she'd learned to brace against from men who were calculating whether she was worth their time. Something more direct than that. Something that didn't look away and wasn't trying to hide itself. You look rested, he said, which she suspected was his version of you look beautiful. I slept 6 consecutive hours last night, she said. I feel like a different species. 6 hours. Something moved across his expression. When was the last time before that? Honestly, I've stopped tracking it. Tracking it makes it worse. They sat down. He poured water without asking, the way people do when they've been paying attention. Tell me about Noah, he said. Not the summary version. The real version. So she told him. The real version. The one that included the dinosaur theology and the lost rock and the heaven lost and found and the way Noah said the word actually, with an emphasis that suggested he had considered all possible alternatives and this was his final position. She told him about the train track and the daddy blanket and the morning negotiations and how sometimes she'd look at her son's face and be so overwhelmed by the specific, irreducible realness of him that she'd have to go stand in the bathroom for 30 seconds just to process the magnitude of being responsible for a whole person. Taeyun listened the way he did everything. Completely. Not waiting for his turn to speak. Actually listening. My mother raised me and Sujin alone for 3 years, he said when she'd finished. My father was absent in various ways. She never let us see how hard it was. I only understood later. He paused. She was extraordinary. She is extraordinary. She just retired last year and she called me to tell me, and I had to end the call and sit in my office for 10 minutes because I realized I had never once, in my adult life, told her specifically what I thought of her. Did you call her back? I flew to Seoul that weekend. Bella looked at him. What did you say to her? The not-quite smile came and went. I told her that every standard I've held myself to, every principle I've tried to build anything by, they came from her. And that I was sorry it took me this long to say it directly. What did she say? She made me eat dinner and told me I was too thin. Bella pressed her lips together to contain the smile. Failed. She sounds like she's the best person in your family. Undeniably. He met her eyes across the table. She would like you. She likes people who say the hard thing directly instead of managing around it. The air between them shifted slightly. Not uncomfortably, the opposite, which was its own kind of unnerving. I'm trying to figure you out, Bella said. I know. You make it difficult. You're very... She searched for the word. Controlled, he offered. I was going to say intentional. Everything about you feels deliberate. He considered this. I learned early that careless people cause damage they never see. I decided I didn't want to be that kind of person. And what kind of person do you want to be? The question settled between them. He looked at her steadily, and when he spoke, it was with the careful precision she'd come to recognize as his particular form of honesty. The kind that's worth trusting, he said. That's always been the goal. Everything else is secondary. She drove herself home that night. He'd offered a car. She declined, because she wasn't ready to fold that much of herself into someone else's care. But she sat in her own car in the parking garage for 4 minutes before starting the engine. Just sitting in the dark with the feeling of the evening settled around her like something she'd been cold without. Collins came to the apartment on a Saturday. He didn't call first, which was vintage Collins, the assumption that access was a right he hadn't yet forfeited. Bella opened the door and found him on the other side with his hands in his pockets and his expression arranged into something he probably thought looked humble. Noah was at the kitchen table eating cereal and drawing. He looked up when he saw his father, and Bella watched him go very still the way children go still when something they've needed for a long time suddenly appears and the body doesn't yet know what to do with the reality of it. Hey, little man, Collins said. Daddy, Noah said, not with excitement, with something quieter and more complex, the careful economy of a child who has learned, that some things are fragile. Collins came in. He sat at the table with Noah. He looked at the drawing and asked about it. Noah showed him, gradually thawing, gradually allowing himself to believe in the moment. Bella made coffee. Her hands were steady. She was very calm, the way she was calm during difficult deliveries, the calm of complete focus, of all her attention turned on the thing that mattered most. After 20 minutes, Noah climbed into Collins's lap. After 30, he was showing Collins the train track in his room. Bella sat in the kitchen and felt the complicated mathematics of it, the relief that Noah was getting something he needed, the grief that it had taken 14 months of absence to get here, the anger she kept in a very specific box, the fear that this would become almost another partial presence that Noah would build mythology around. When Collins put Noah down for his afternoon nap and came back to the kitchen, Bella had 2 cups of coffee on the table. He's amazing, Collins said. His voice had something real in it that she hadn't heard in a long time. He's just, Bella, he's amazing. I know. I've missed so much. Yes. He sat down. I want to fix that. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Collins, what does that actually look like? Not in feeling, in calendar. In specific, scheduled time. In commitments that Noah can count on. He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him doing the thing he always did, feeling the pull of the larger promise when the specific one felt constricting. I can do every other weekend. And video calls on Wednesdays. That's a start. And Bella. No, she said. Don't. Whatever you're about to add about us, don't. His jaw tightened slightly. I'm just saying that being around you and Noah again, it makes me realize. Collins. Her voice was very quiet and very clear. What I want for Noah is his father, consistently and reliably, for the rest of his childhood. What I want for myself is something I'm still figuring out. But those are two separate things, and I need you to understand that. Being a good father to Noah doesn't give you access back to me. They're separate. He looked at her for a long moment. There's someone else, he said. Not a question exactly. She thought about a man who sent her a plant that required almost no attention and still chose to send it. She thought about dinner in a quiet restaurant and a story about flying to Seoul on a weekend to say the hard thing directly to his mother. There might be, she said. That's not your concern. You're not going to tell me. No. She stood because the conversation was complete. Same time next Saturday, Collins. We'll make a schedule. Noah will be glad to have it, and I think eventually so will you. She told Taeyoon about it that evening. He came, she typed. He sat with Noah for an hour. Noah showed him the train track. How is Noah? He seems okay. Careful. But kids are resilient in ways that simultaneously amaze and break my heart. And you? She looked at the question for a moment. I told him that being a good father to Noah and having access to me are two separate things. He didn't love hearing that. But it was true. Yes. Good. She smiled at the phone. He figured out there might be someone else. A pause. What did you tell him? That it wasn't his concern. Another pause, longer. Then, is there someone else? She looked at the succulent on the table. It was thriving, which felt like a small message about something. I think so, she typed. I'm still being careful. I'm not good at not being careful. I know. I'm not asking you to be less careful. I'm asking you to tell me when you're ready for me to meet Noah. Her chest did something at that. A slow, warm compression, the kind that came from being seen accurately and chosen anyway. Soon, she typed. Soon is enough, he wrote back. She told him about Noah's daddy blanket one night in early December. They were on the phone, they'd moved to actual phone calls, voice calls, which felt more intimate than texts in a way that still surprised her. His voice in her ear in the dark of her bedroom while the city moved quietly outside her window. I've been thinking about retiring the name, she said. Not the hoodie. Noah can keep that as long as he wants it. But I've been thinking about whether it helps him or whether it keeps him in a story that should start changing. Taeyoon was quiet for a moment. What does Noah want to call it? He doesn't know it needs a different name yet. He doesn't know that's an option. What if you let him name it himself, without suggesting anything? Just take away the label and see what he reaches for. She thought about that, the simplicity of it, and the wisdom in the simplicity. When did you get good at parenting advice? You don't have children. No, he said. But I was a child raised without a consistent father. And I remember what it felt like when adults made decisions about my story without giving me any authorship of it. The quiet that followed was soft rather than uncomfortable. Taeyoon, she said. Yes. Noah has a thing on Sunday. His preschool has a family morning, music, crafts, that sort of thing. Collins has him Saturday, so Sunday is mine. She paused. It's not a big thing, but it's his world. And I want. She stopped. I want to see his world. Taeyoon said quietly. Yes. You don't have to be anything specific. I'm just someone who knows his mother. That's enough for now. She exhaled slowly. Okay. Okay, he said. And the single word held more care than most speeches she'd heard. She worried that Saturday night while Collins had Noah, that she was making a mistake. She sat in the unusual silence of her apartment and cataloged every way this could go wrong. Noah getting attached and then hurt, her own heart doing the same, the impossible complexity of weaving a man like Taeyoon into the fabric of a life like hers. She was still worrying on Sunday morning when she was getting Noah ready and he was negotiating about his shirt and she was losing the negotiation as usual, and the ordinary beauty of the morning crowded out the fear the way it always did. Mommy, is your friend tall? Noah asked from inside the shirt she was pulling over his head. She paused. How do you know my friend is tall? His head emerged from the collar. Because you said he has good eyes. Tall people see from far away. They need good eyes. The 4-year-old logic of this was so complete that she didn't attempt to argue with it. Yes, she said. He's tall. Okay, Noah said. He picked up his jacket with the air of someone who has received the information they required. Can he help me with the train track? The junction is still broken. We can ask him. Okay, Noah said again, and walked toward the door with his small philosopher's certainty, and Bella stood still in his room for 2 seconds and let herself feel it. The terrifying, illuminated possibility of something good. Taeyoon arrived with a box of Korean pastries he'd clearly thought about, things that were visually interesting to a 4-year-old, not too sweet, and required no particular sophistication to enjoy. He crouched down when he met Noah so that they were eye to eye, which Bella noted and said, "Your mother tells me you're an engineer." Noah looked at him with solemn assessment. "I'm working on a junction problem," he said. "I've had those," Taeyoon said. "Tell me about it." So Noah told him, in considerable detail, with diagrams drawn on the back of the preschool's activity schedule. Taeyoon listened with the full, complete attention she'd watched him give everything, and asked questions that made Noah's eyes go wide with the pleasure of being taken seriously. And Bella stood across the room at the coffee station and felt something rearrange itself in her chest. Quietly, permanently. At the craft table, Noah made a drawing. He looked at it for a moment, then pushed it across the table toward Taeyoon without saying anything. Taeyoon looked at it. It was recognizably 3 figures, a small one, a tall one, and a medium one. "Who's this?" he asked, pointing to the medium figure. "That's my mom," Noah said. "She's in the middle because she's in the middle of everything." He pointed to the small one. "That's me." He pointed to the tall one. "That's you." Taeyoon looked at the drawing for a long moment. Bella watched his face and saw the careful control of it and what it was working to contain. "Can I keep this?" he asked. Noah considered it with the gravity of a small person deciding something important. "Yes," he decided. "But you have to hang it up somewhere. Not in a drawer." "Not in a drawer," Taeyoon agreed. "I know exactly where to put it." On the subway home, they took it because Noah loved the subway with his whole heart and had since infancy. Noah fell asleep across Bella's lap, his shoes still on, his hat slightly sideways, completely and unconsciously trusting the world to hold him while he was unconscious. Taeyoon sat beside her. The train rocked. The city moved past in its underground dark. "He's extraordinary," Taeyoon said quietly, and his eyes were on Noah with something in them she couldn't quite name except that it didn't frighten her, felt instead like recognition. "He told you I'm in the middle of everything," she said. "He's not wrong." She looked at him, at the drawing carefully folded and put in his jacket pocket, at the care with which he'd adjusted his position so that Noah's legs had more room across their laps. "And you," she almost said, "where do you fit in the picture?" She didn't say it. Some things didn't need to be rushed into language. Some things were already clear in the way 2 people sat together on a subway while a small person slept between them, trusting, and the city moved around them, and neither of them needed to say anything to know that something had been built here, in the space between a text that wasn't sent and a drawing that would not be put in a drawer. She leaned her head back against the seat, closed her eyes for a moment. "Taeyoon." "Yes. Thank you for not looking away on the train. That first night." A pause. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet and very sure. "Thank you for letting me see." The train moved through its dark channel beneath the city. Noah breathed in his sleep, even and trusting. Bella Turner felt, for the first time in a very long time, that the space around her held more than weight. Outside, New York moved on in all its indifferent enormity. Inside the train car, in the particular warmth of a small boy's sleeping weight and a man who did not look away, something that had been very carefully closed began, with extraordinary slowness, to open. The text was still in her drafts when she deleted it. Not sent. Deleted. Because some messages belonged to the version of you that needed to write them, and not to the version of you becoming something else. She didn't send it. She didn't need to anymore. Some men leave, and the silence they leave behind is heavier than their presence ever was. And some men sit beside you on a subway and read your grief and don't look away, and slowly, patiently, without asking for anything you're not ready to give, they make the silence light. Noah still has the hoodie. He renamed it on a Tuesday in December, unprompted, while Bella was folding laundry. He held it up and announced, with the authority of a small philosopher who has arrived at a conclusion, "This is just my blanket now. It's mine." Bella stood very still. "Yeah, baby," she said. "It is." He tucked it under his arm and went back to his train track, where the junction, as of that Tuesday, finally held. Some messages are never meant to be sent, and some people arrive exactly when you need them, not to fix everything, but to help you breathe again. If this story touched you, tell me, would you have sent the text? And if you believe that the right people don't walk away, they stay, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay for more stories like this.